From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome to our Potomac Watch podcast. I'm Paul Gigot, the editorial page editor of the Wall Street Journal. Our special guest today is Christie, the two-term former governor of New Jersey and now Republican candidate for president. Welcome, sir.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
Thanks for being here. Let's start with a question you may not like. The recent Wall Street Journal poll that says Donald Trump is leading the field on the Republican side with 59% of the vote, primary electorate, despite having been indicted 4 times. How do you explain that?
Well, first off, I'd love to counsel you. I know you don't make these decisions, but to have the Wall Street Journal and Fox stop wasting their money on national polls. We don't elect a president nationally. We don't nominate a president nationally. We do it state by state. So these national polls are useless. And the best proof of that is that Donald Trump never led in a national poll in 2016, not once. He didn't even lead on the poll that was taken on Election Day. He lost the popular vote. But he won the electoral vote with 306 electoral votes. That's the way we elect presidents. That's the way we nominate presidents. Now, 59% of people saying they support Donald Trump is because his campaign has not really engaged yet. It started really about 3 weeks ago when the first debate happened. And I think now you're going to start to see people looking at it critically. And it's going to be up to me and the other candidates in the race to make the case against Donald Trump. Now, I think I'm doing it kind of by myself because when I listen to the other candidates and watch them on the debate stage, all 6 of them raised their hands and said they'd support him, even if he was a convicted felon. So it's a little lonely out there making the case against Trump, but they're going to lose. All the others who raised their hands are going to lose because you don't beat somebody by saying you're supportive of them.
Well, 48% in that same poll of Republicans say the indictments make them more likely to vote for Donald Trump, which is a reasonable inference from that, is that the indictments are actually helping him get the nomination because of a kind of backlash against the indictments, a sense that they're Democratic Party prosecutions and therefore unfair.
Well, I think the argument that I'm making and that we have to continue to make to Republican voters is whether you think the indictments are fair or not, they are a reality. The reality is that he is out on bail in 4 different jurisdictions. The reality is he's going to be spending all of the month of March and most of the month of April in a courtroom in Washington, D.C. 5 days a week, not making the case against Joe Biden. And if they think that's going to help us win back the White House, they're not paying attention. So part of the job is going to be I'm not here to make the case that the indictments are fair or unfair. They're a reality. And that's what we need to deal with as a Republican Party. And if we want to nominate someone who is sure to lose to Joe Biden, I saw in your most recent poll, 62% of independents say they won't vote for Donald Trump. Well, let me guarantee you something, having come from a blue state. If 62% of independents don't vote for the Republican, they're losing.
Yeah, it's 46% in head-to-head Biden and Trump.
Again, these head-to-head national polls mean nothing. If 62% of independents are not voting for him, he's going to lose every swing state. They're called swing states because they're judged by how the independents go. He gets good numbers in red states. Great. So the 3 electoral votes in South Dakota are his, guaranteed. But what's he going to do in Wisconsin? What's he going to do in Pennsylvania? What's he going to do in Michigan? Those are the places that we're either going to win or lose the presidency. That's where independents decide it. And he is underwater with independents by so much that he cannot recover.
What do you make of Judge Tanya Chutkan's decision to hold the trial on the January 6th indictments on March 4th, to start on March 4th and Super Tuesday's March 5th? Republicans could end up nominating Trump before they even realize whether he's going to be convicted or not.
That's why we can't do that. That's why we cannot do it. And what are we supposed to do? Wait until after the election happens so people would not know at all whether this guy's a convicted felon or not and have to vote for him? Look, it's inconvenient when someone is so irresponsible as president of the United States that they get indicted in 4 different jurisdictions and then decide to run again. You know, I've had voters ask me over and over again, isn't there a law against people who have been convicted of a federal crime being president? And I said, no, there isn't, because Madison and Jefferson and Franklin and Hamilton never thought someone would be so self-consumed, so selfish, that they would put themselves before the country by running for office when they've been an indicted and then convicted felon.
All right, let's turn to some substance, which I'm sure you'll be happy to do. Let's talk about, particularly about economics. I don't really have a sense of what your economic policy would be if you got into the White House. I mean, what would you stress? You know what Biden's been doing. You know what Bidenomics is as he defines it. Mm-hmm. But how would you be different? What do we need to do economically?
Well, a few things. First of all, we need to extend the Trump tax cuts. I think those need to be extended and done. They worked well when President Trump and the Congress passed them in 2017, and they would work well again being extended to continue to help our economy grow. But we need to eliminate inflation. We need to bring inflation back down to the 2% level. And the way to do that, in part, is to reduce government spending. We saw a report this week that the deficit's going to double to $2 trillion under Joe Biden this year, while he's out on Labor Day touting that he cut the deficit. Only Joe Biden could live in that world all by himself. We have to do that, Paul. And the fact is that it's going to be painful and it's going to be difficult.
What do you cut?
Well, everything has to be on the table. I think except for defense, everything has to be on the table.
So when you say everything's on the table, that includes entitlements, that includes Medicare, that includes Social Security, that includes Medicaid.
We have to deal with those things. They are not just an issue from a budget perspective. They're an issue from a sustainability perspective. We know that in 10 years, Medicare will be broke. In 11 years, Social Security will be broke. The law, as it's written now, requires an automatic 25% cut in Medicare benefits, an automatic 24% cut in Social Security benefits. We cannot permit that to happen. So we have to look at retirement age. We have to look at means testing. Those are two things that have to be looked at.
Be willing to look at raising the retirement age for Social Security.
I absolutely
How
would.
about private accounts?
Look, I've always been in favor of private accounts, but I don't think that private accounts by themselves will solve the problem. Mm-hmm. You have to deal with retirement age. And let me be clear, not for people in their 50s or 60s like me and you, Paul.
Thanks.
We're too old to adjust to that at this point. My oldest son just turned 30. If he can't adjust to a few years increase in the retirement age over the next 35 to 40 years, he's got bigger problems than the raising the retirement age. But we know that raising the retirement age will definitely add solvency in years to the Social Security program. And we do need to look at means testing, Paul. I mean, look, I'm all for people having been enormously successful in this country. But if they are enormously successful, maybe they don't need to receive their Social Security check.
Yeah, I can tell you what you're going to get on that, because even from Republican voters, because every time we mention that in our pages, we get responses from readers that say, what do you mean? I paid into this program.
Right.
I want to get back what I'm owed because it's an insurance program and I paid into it.
Right. And guess what, Paul? We also paid for food stamps, and you and I have never used them. We've also paid for all other types of social programs. And Social Security was meant to be a social safety net, so that people would not retire and die in poverty. Mark Zuckerberg is not going to retire or die in poverty. And by the way, nor are most people who have that and generational type wealth.
But you're not going to save a lot of money from Mark Zuckerberg on Social Security. You're going to have to get it if that you're going to do that through basically middle class, well-to-do middle class voters who make $250,000 a year, something like that.
Well, what we're going to do is we're going to run the numbers and see. And then we're going to be in a negotiation with the Congress to try to see what they're willing to do or not do. But if they're unwilling to do anything, Paul, on either retirement age or on means testing, then their only option is going to be taxes or insolvency.
Would you raise the cap on the Social Security payroll?
I would not, because I don't believe that further taxing middle-class folks makes any sense. And that's what you'd be doing when you raise that cap.
And on Medicare premium support plan that the Republicans have offered a couple of times in Congress that goes back even to the 1990s when the Clinton Commission proposed it. You support that?
I do.
Those are basically payments to individuals who can then buy their own insurance.
Correct.
I think that's the right way to do it.
I think that's one of the ways to do it, yes.
Okay. Well, let me ask you on taxes one other time. Is there more tax reform that can be done? Where would you go after the tax code to fix it?
Look, I think there definitely is further tax reform that can be done. The question is, can you get Congress to do it? And I think that if it's in an overall package of other things that they want to have done, I think you can persuade Congress to make the code simpler. I think the way to do it is just to continue to take out things that are now deductible that shouldn't be any longer. We're never going to get rid of the home mortgage deduction, nor should we. But you see already that the SALT deduction has been reduced significantly. As you'll recall, I favored that in 2016, even though I'm from a big tax state, because I don't think the rest of the country should be subsidizing the poor decision-making that's being done.
You don't want to lift that cap now?
No, I don't want to lift the cap.
Okay, interesting. No. But I guess the question is, do we need further tax cutting in this country? Are the tax rates still too high, particularly in individuals?
Well, no, look, I think that the tax rates where they are post the Trump tax cuts are a good place to be. And I don't think we need to reduce taxes well beyond that. But I do think what we need to do is to continue to make sure people are taking full advantage of growth in this country. And those tax cuts will provide growth with lower interest rates, will provide people with a better way of life. And that's what we're looking to do. Right now, with prices up 17% since Biden became president, no matter how much your wages have gone up, they're not keeping up with that 17%. And it's causing it's causing a worse standard of life for those folks. And that's why, despite all the things Biden put out there about better employment numbers, et cetera, people don't feel it because it is like an additional tax on them. Inflation is exactly an additional tax on those folks. And we need to bring that down. That will help to enhance their lifestyle as well.
Not exactly a populist issue, but monetary policy, very important to, particularly to inflation. How much responsibility do you put on Jerome Powell and the Federal Reserve for inflation as opposed to Biden spending?
Yeah, look, I think he probably deserves about 30% of the blame, 70% to Biden, because he started too late in raising rates. He should have started to raise rates sooner. He didn't. And then once he started to raise rates, he raised them very aggressively and very quickly. Now, I think that long term, it's going to have a positive effect on interest rates, but we didn't have to get here. And it's a combination of Biden spending, which I think was unsolvable just by the Fed. But he does deserve some of the blame.
Yeah, well, they monetized a good portion of the debt by buying all those bonds for
They sure did.
So trade is also reasserting itself as an issue. Donald Trump proposing a 10% tariff on all imports that the United States takes in. Good idea?
No,
Why not?
A good idea. Because it's just going to retaliate against us, and we're going to get back into that. What we should be doing is negotiating fair trade deals. Now, Donald Trump talks about this great trade deal he negotiated with China, yet China has complied with about a quarter of what they said they were going to buy in terms of soybeans, less than a quarter of what they said they were going to buy in other agricultural goods, yet he's running around saying it was the greatest trade deal ever. Well, it looks good on paper, but China's not complying with it. What I think we need to be focusing on is negotiating better trade deals and enforcing them, not having these tariffs that, in the end, just become a tax on the American
Would you
people.
repeal the Trump tariffs on China?
Not unilaterally, no, Paul, but it would have to be as part of a renegotiated trade relationship between ourselves and China that has much greater protections of intellectual property and has penalties for them not complying with what they say they're going to do in terms of buying American goods.
What are those penalties? Because obviously we've been preaching that going back 15 years. Don't steal our property. Don't have cyber theft. They promise American presidents, oh, sure, well, number one, they don't do it, they say. And number two, if we are doing it, we'll stop.
Right.
And then they keep doing it. So what do you do?
Those tariffs could then be lifted, or increased rather, if they don't comply.
You know, Michael Gallagher, who's the head of the House Committee on China, has been saying that American business is subsidizing the Chinese military buildup, its technological buildup and advances with its investment in China. What do you think of his proposal that we need to limit, curtail to a significant extent, and some say even ban U.S. investment in China, private investment?
Yeah, look, I'm not a big government Republican. Ron DeSantis is the big government Republican in this race. And I'm sure Ron totally favors that because he favors everything that he opposes having government solve it. What I'm concerned about, Paul, is the Chinese purchase of American land is much more of a concern for me.
Why is that a concern? I mean, you don't want to buy farmland, so what?
What do you mean, so what? I don't want the Chinese Communist Party accumulating enough farmland to have an impact upon our food chain supply.
But if we get into any kind of trouble like that, we could just confiscate it.
I'd like to stop it off the bat. I don't want to wind up having the government give permission to do something stupid and then confiscate land because it did something stupid.
So you would ban all Chinese purchases, private and state-owned entities?
I would control it and put controls on how much they could own because I don't want them getting enough so that the food chain could be controlled in any way by the Chinese Communist Party, because I don't think anybody really knows at the moment how much they own currently. So where you place the cap on that would very much depend on where they are at the moment. We'd have to find that out. And then I think it's appropriate to cap that.
Well, on that, you agree with Ron DeSantis because he's been doing something like that.
Well, look at that. You're bringing people together, Paul, on the Potomac Watch podcast.
All right, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we'll be back with Christie talking about Ukraine and the 2024 election when we come back. Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, Play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast. That is, Play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. I'm Paul Gigot. This is Potomac Watch, and we're back with Christie, candidate for President of the United States. A lot of reports that are emerging from U.S. think tanks and defense analysts and war games that we simply aren't prepared right now to be able to deter China from an invasion of Taiwan, and we are not able to defend it adequately or except at very great cost if they did decide to take Taiwan. What would you do on January 20th? You take the oath of office. What do you do immediately to deter China from invading Taiwan?
Well, first thing you need to do is to have a strong Secretary of Defense who you sit down with and have a plan on how to expand our naval forces. I think the biggest problem we have of the branches of our military in terms of preparedness is our naval forces. We're too low on ships. We're too low on submarines. They need to be modernized as well. The nuclear submarine capability that we have is the biggest deterrent, in my view, to Chinese aggression. They can't find our subs. They don't know where they are. They don't know what they're capable of doing in the main. And I think we need to expand that capability. Secondly, I do think that we need to modernize our Air Force as well. Both of those things will be elements that once we started to put that in motion, the Chinese would understand that there's a new day coming. And that's what we need to show them. This can't be rhetoric. It has to be actions on our part because the Chinese ignore our rhetoric. And quite frankly, given the conduct of Joe Biden and Donald Trump, they should ignore our rhetoric.
Well, the Gallagher Committee says that, I believe that they found this, that if in a hot war over Taiwan, our long-range missile capability would be exhausted in 3 days. 3 days. That's not a deterrent to capability. You've got to do that immediately, right now.
Right. Well, look, there's certain things you can do right away, and there's certain things that take time to build. And I think that what we have to be realistic about is where the Obama, Trump, and Biden administrations have placed us. And it's all three of them.
You don't give Trump any credit for the defense buildup. He did.
It was a half measure. It was a half measure. As was most things with Donald Trump, Paul, it was more talk than action. And he continues to say he had the greatest military buildup by any American president. Ronald Reagan is spinning in his grave right now, hearing him say that. And the fact is, look at the results. Has it deterred anything? It hasn't deterred the Chinese from being more aggressive. It hasn't deterred Putin. It hasn't deterred any of this kind of adventurism in South America either. So what Trump did was a half measure at best. He continued to undercut both General Mattis and Mark Esper. And you can't have that kind of relationship between a president and his defense secretary and expect that, and his joint chiefs, who he's called all forms of idiots over the course of time. The Chinese look at that and laugh. And if anybody thinks that bringing Donald Trump back into the White House will make the Chinese shudder, all Xi Jinping's going to have to do is come over and tell him how wonderful he is. And, he'll get away with anything. Remember, this was the guy that Trump said we could trust on COVID.
Let's talk about Biden and Ukraine. A lot of people give Biden credit for supporting Ukraine after the invasion. Where do you think he's failed?
He hasn't been aggressive enough. He's given them just enough not to lose.
Why do you think he's doing that?
Because I think he's generally a hand-wringer.
Worried about Russian escalation?
That may be part of it, but I think also this is a guy who couldn't wait to get out of Afghanistan. He's a guy who told President Obama not to go after bin Laden. He was begging Obama for 8 years to pull out of Afghanistan. And even Barack Obama thought it was a stupid idea. All I need to do is go back and you look at Defense Secretary Gates's book, where he said on every major foreign policy issue of the last 30 years, Biden's been wrong. When you have someone there who's instinctively wrong, which Biden is, I don't think he's up to the job now from an age perspective. And I think that impairs his ability to be able to make good decisions. And lastly, he's got some advisors around him who are the B team. This is a group of Senate staffers who have been elevated to some of the highest national defense positions in America. And they're obviously not up to it either. So I think all those things have combined for the policy in Ukraine to be right direction, wrong speed.
What do you do right now to finally help Ukraine do the job? A lot of people talk about the ATACMS, these long-range missiles we need to deliver. But the Pentagon whispers, they don't say this publicly, but they whisper, well, we just don't have enough for ourselves, much less to give to Ukraine. What else do you do right now other than maybe deliver those ATACMS and ramp up these supply lines?
Well, that you have to do. Yes. Artillery shells, they're getting outgunned on our regular artillery shells on an average day 10-1. And we should have done the F-16s much sooner. And we have to be able to train them faster than a year. These are already pilots. You're telling me look, I'm not a pilot, Paul, so I can't say I know this for certain, but I'd look at my chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff as president and say, you're telling me you can't get already qualified pilot in Ukraine ready to fly an F-16 any sooner than a year from now?
If this bogs down into, well, it is already bogged down, but let's say the counteroffensive that the Ukrainians are mounting doesn't succeed immediately. It's a slow, real, brutal slog. Do we have to be prepared to support them for another year, 2, 3, if that's what it takes?
I think we have to be prepared to support them for at least the next year or two. Yes. Because, look, this is a proxy war with China. Again, back to China. And you see just today, Putin meeting with Kim Jong-un, right? I mean, this is the naivete of the Trump, DeSantis, Ramaswamy foreign policy. They believe that they can go over and talk to Putin, and they're going to separate Putin from Kim Jong-un, Xi Jinping, and the mullahs in Iran.
Are you sure DeSantis believes that?
I absolutely am sure DeSantis believes it.
I mean, I've heard that from Ramaswamy and Trump, but I'm not so sure I've heard it from DeSantis.
Oh, no. What DeSantis says, and he said it on the stage, he doesn't really answer it. I want NATO to do more. I mean, what a BS answer. He's asked directly about American support to Ukraine, and he was programmed by his debate prepsters to not answer that question. Because if he answers it honestly, from his perspective, he angers the Wall Street Journal editorial page, which he doesn't want to do. If he gives the Wall Street Journal editorial page, then he angers Tucker Carlson. So goodness gracious, just in this building, or alumni from this building, he's torn into a million different pieces. What he should do is just be honest. I don't know what he really thinks. And he doesn't answer those questions. I give Ramaswamy credit for it's a stupid answer, but at least it's direct. DeSantis, it's the same way as when the question was asked about whether he would support a felon. He had to look at everybody else. Hand down, looking around. Oh, more people than not are up? Okay, I'll put my hand up. Is that leadership? I don't think so. And he's failed on the Ukraine question as well. And I'll take him at his word what he said to Tucker. It's a territorial dispute.
You think? Yeah. Of course, he backed off from that a little bit.
Well, of course he did. But he didn't take a firm position the other way. And if somebody's going to be, look, Ramaswamy has seemingly perfected this of being on both sides of the issue and then telling you that what you heard him say, are you going to believe him or your lying ears? And DeSantis is the same way, except he doesn't have Ramaswamy's personality. So he doesn't get as much attention, but he's doing the same thing. It's just so boring that nobody notices it.
The grain embargo that Putin's imposed is leading to some hardship and shortages and price rises and so on. There have been some people who proposed reflagging Ukrainian grain shipments under the American flag or other flags, and then having U.S. naval escorts patrol them, move them out of the Black Sea. Do you support that?
No.
Why not?
No, because I don't want to have that level of American involvement in this conflict. I think that escalates it beyond where I'm comfortable escalating it.
Do you think the Russian Navy really wants to meddle with American naval ships?
I don't think they want to. But you know what? Some, Russian naval officer who's, overdrank his vodka ration, I'm not taking a chance that we're going to start a hot war with Russia on that issue. And look, this shows you who Putin is. And so does his deal with the Saudis on continuing to cut production. He knows that that's hurting people, but it's helping his war effort. That's why the Trump, DeSantis, Ramaswamy foreign policy is so hopelessly naive. That guy who's willing to do that on grain, willing to do that on oil to the rest of the world, that's the guy that Trump's going to settle this thing in 24 hours. You know what he's going to do with Paul? He's going to hand the deed to Ukraine over to Putin and move on.
certainly suggests that may be the case. Let's go, before we finish, back to the campaign. And obviously, you're not campaigning much in Iowa.
Not at all.
Not at all. So you're not counting on Iowa. You are campaigning a lot in New Hampshire, and that's where you're placing, seems to me, a big part of your...
New Hampshire and South Carolina.
Okay. So you're still, what are you, in 8 or 9% in
No, last poll was 14%. Second place ahead of both Ramaswamy and DeSantis. DeSantis dropping to fourth at 9%. So we're at 14% in the newest poll in New Hampshire. We're 20 points behind Trump, but Trump's only at 34 in that poll.
Now, there's no question that Trump is not doing as well in New Hampshire or Iowa as he is in the national polls, as you suggested earlier. But if Trump wins Iowa,
right,
he's going to come out of there with momentum. Isn't it really over then, because he's going to sweep into New Hampshire?
No, it's not. It's over now. I mean, it's really over now, Paul. If I listen to you and the Wall Street Journal and all the other polls.
Look, I'm one of the few people who are saying it's not over, but I'm asking you what you're going to do
look,
if he comes out of Ohio.
I'm lying. I am working and lying in the tall grass waiting for him in New Hampshire or in the granite, wherever you want to say. Look, the thing that's amazing to me about, and I'm putting all media into this box, okay? There is a sentiment that they're concerned about Trump being the nominee, but a desire to end the race.
Not me, man.
Where all the polls are, this is where it is. Well, campaigns matter. And by the way, the fact that, he's doing less well in Iowa and less well in New Hampshire could be a bit of a sign, because maybe those people have seen more of a campaign so far. Maybe those people, as they normally do, are generally paying more attention than other people are in the country. And so I'm willing to have that fight there. Look, if Trump's the nominee, Trump's the nominee. I mean, I'm not going to set myself on fire over it. But the fact is that the fight needs to be had for two reasons. One, he has disqualified himself, in my view, by his personal conduct to even be able to be elected president of the United States, because I think he'll lose to Biden. But secondly, let's face it, the Trump presidency was a mixed bag at best. He messed up the handling of COVID in every way that he could, except for Operation Warp Speed. He didn't build the wall. He built 52 miles of wall in 4 years. He didn't repeal and replace Obamacare. Instead, he chose to piss off John McCain so bad that John McCain sank him when he was going to repeal it. And he added non-COVID related debt, $6.5 trillion to the national debt. I mean, so why would we even want to have this guy back if you're a conservative Republican? Did he do some things well? Yes. The tax cut, I think he did well. The Abraham Accords, I think, was a triumph. But that's not enough to send back a guy who, in 2016, Paul said, I am your voice. And in 2023 says, I am your retribution. I don't think that's a sales pitch to be a uniting president of the United States.
Okay, so a lot of discussion among Republicans, not necessarily the candidates now, but among Republican activists saying at some point, if you want to have a real contest against Trump, you have to consolidate behind one candidate. When do you think that has to happen? I'm not asking you when you're going to get out or others should get, but when do you think the people have to consolidate in the primary cycle?
I think it's probably after the first four.
After South Carolina?
Yeah.
Really? Well, that just gives you about a week or two before Super Tuesday.
It depends on what happens in those races. Look, I think there'll be consolidation between now and the end of the year. I don't think everybody who was on the stage 3 weeks ago will be on the stage 3 weeks from now. I don't think that everybody who's on the stage 3 weeks from now will be on the October stage. So you could have this down, counting Trump, to a 4 to 6 person race, I think, by the time we get to Iowa. Probably 6. Iowa will win us some people out. Look, if Ron DeSantis doesn't win Iowa, he's done. He's bet everything on Iowa. He's done if he doesn't win. He's out. If Tim Scott doesn't win in Iowa, does Tim stay in? I don't know.
Maybe to South Carolina.
Maybe, but he's got the Nikki problem then.
Right.
Both of them are going to want to stay to South Carolina, right?
And then Mike Pence is Iowa.
If Mike Pence doesn't win Iowa, or maybe come in second, maybe, I don't know that he stays. If I'm not first or second in New Hampshire, I think I've got a big problem. So, this will winnow pretty quickly, I think. And by the way, If Trump were to lose Iowa or New Hampshire,
then it's fun.
Then all bets are off.
Yeah, then we've got a contest.
And that's my point when I say 34% in New Hampshire in the latest poll. That means 66% of the people in that poll don't want him. People say to me, well, how are you going to persuade the 34% of Trump voters? Well, why the hell do I want to fish in the 34% pond when there's a 66% pond over here I can fish in? I'm fishing over there. And by the way, if in the process I persuade any of the 34%, they are welcome. But I want folks to remember this. This is about beating Joe Biden. And I'm the only person on that stage that's ever beaten a Democratic incumbent. I'm in a blue state, getting outspent 3-1. And there's only been 3 incumbent Democratic governors that have lost in the last 30 years. You want to beat a Democratic incumbent president? The last one to lose was Jimmy Carter. And he was defeated by a conservative Republican governor from a blue state. Sounds like a good plan, Paul.
We shall see, Governor. Christie, thanks so much for being here. Appreciate your coming in. Thanks to all of our listeners. So we're here every day on Potomac Watch, and we hope you'll be with us tomorrow. Thanks for listening.